Sokka has never been a stupid character. He's been stupid about some things, and he can definitely act stupid sometimes. His sense of humor is pretty lowbrow and goofy, for example. But when it comes to, like, reason and strategy, he's a pretty smart guy. Just in the last review, for example, we talked about an episode where the other two were perfectly willing to believe in a supernatural thing that couldn't be proven. Sokka was skeptical of it, and I think rightfully so. And it's in this episode, Bato of the Water Tribe, that Sokka's reasonable side really comes into its own, and he finds his niche as the group strategist. Like, it's clear that he has skills that he doesn't demonstrate all of the time. Like, the episode opens with him using context clues from a past battle that happened in the woods that they're passing through to track his father's Water Tribe warrior squad. I don't know what word I was going for there, but squad works fine. and down to a nearby beach where they run into the titular Bato, who was wounded and had to be left behind by the rest of the party. Party's probably a better word, right? Fantasy world party. It works, right? And this gives him and Katara the chance to reconnect with their culture a little bit after being away from home for so long, as well as the chance to reconnect with Bato, who was their father's best friend and like an uncle to them, for lack of a better term. Bato is holed up in an abbey where the sisters make perfumes, big clay jugs of them that Link would have so much fun shattering, and I've been playing so much Zelda lately that I really wanted to shatter them too. They've been treating him and feeding him and keeping him sheltered, and he's set up a little Water Tribe house, a little Southern Water Tribe house. It's really cool. Like, we haven't gotten much of the Southern Water Tribe culture yet, and like it's based on Inuit culture. It's based on a real thing. I could Google it, but I don't know much about Inuit culture. And it was really cool to see this analog of it explored even just a little bit in the show. They recount old stories with Bato and talk about home and eat traditional Water Tribe food that Aang absolutely hates, but like Momo didn't even want any, so like I imagine it's probably an acquired taste at best. And Aang, for the first time since he's met these people, doesn't feel like he fits in with their group at the moment. He starts to feel alienated. And so, when the messenger that Bato is expecting with the location of the rest of their group, so that he knows exactly where to go meet up with them, something he plans to do as soon as he gets the message, when that arrives and Aang intercepts it, he doesn't give it to them. Because they do that thing that happens in shows all the time, where a character overhears part of a conversation and it makes it sound like they're going to be betrayed or abandoned or whatever. And it sounds like, based on the little bit that Aang heard, Katara and Sokka are going to go with Bato to reunite with their father. They're going to leave him behind. Meanwhile, as all of this has been going on, Zuko and Iroh, just by random chance, happen upon a character who I would very much like to step on me. Me and Iroh are in agreement on that. June, a professional mercenary tracker and bounty hunter, and her giant whippy-tongued paralytic mole thing. I can't remember what it was called. Its name is Nyla. And I do know, I remember reading on the wiki at one point. Was it a writer? They based June's look off of one of the writers. And I think Nyla was named after her dog. I'm probably getting that wrong, but I remember reading something along those lines, and it really stuck with me because I found that very interesting, that someone in real life could look like her. And her creature, Nyla, can follow any scent basically anywhere. And remember, Zuko has Katara's necklace, and while he's not specifically looking for Katara, he expects that Aang will be with her. So they start tracking Katara. But meanwhile, thanks to Bato, Sokka has gotten the chance to go a version of something called ice dodging, a rite of passage that they do at the South Pole. It's a thing that happens when a boy becomes a man. Sokka never got a chance to do it. We've been flashing back a little bit to when his father and Bato and the others left, and he was left to take care of Katara in their stead. And we got to see how much he wanted to go and how much it hurt him to see them leave him behind. And so at first the mention of ice dodging, this thing that he never got to do, just reminds him of that, but Bato is able to give him the gift of taking him, not literally ice dodging, but again, an equivalent of ice dodging in the place of his father. And to do this, he and a couple of his closest friends have to crew a Water Tribe ship, which Bato just happens to have his, and dodge some rocks. And Sokka has to give commands to the others. He has to prove that he's a strong enough leader to make it through this ordeal alive. And he goes above and beyond that, even directing the two of them to use their bending so that he can dodge an obstacle that seemed impossible to dodge. It just goes to show how smart he is and how easily he's able to take environmental stuff as well as take into account the skills of the people around him, even if they're skills that he doesn't understand fully himself, and put them into practice. But because of this, and the fact that they want to make him an honorary member of the tribe for being so reliable, Aang admits to what he did, and Sokka gets mad and says he's going to go with Bato now. Katara is going to go with him. Aang is now on his own the rest of the way to the North Pole. And I totally understand Sokka's reaction here, and I think the fandom does too. I don't see much criticism of Sokka's initial reaction here. But a lot of people say that Aang wouldn't behave the way he did here. Like, it makes sense that he would feel guilty enough to try to make up for what he had done. But they say that he wouldn't even have hidden the message. And I disagree fully. Aang is still a kid. He's a very flawed character. He has not grown into the kind of person who can take every situation seriously immediately yet. Like, eventually, as the show goes on, he becomes somebody who, for the most part anyway, can look at a situation, break it down, and really treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. But he's not there yet. And he has lost everyone. I can imagine that the mere thought of losing his new family like he lost his old family would paralyze him and cause him to make terrible mistakes to try to prevent that from happening. And I think it shows how strong a person he is that he was able to fess up to it in the first place. And I do think it's very cool that even before the big danger climax of the episode happens and they have to come back together anyway, Sokka realizes he was too hard on Aang. He flashes back again to seeing the soldiers leave the southern pole, and he remembers how it felt to see his family leave him behind. And he realizes that he's doing the same thing to this new member of his family. So he decides to go with Aang anyway. Like, the episode still would have worked fine if they had had the big action climax, if Aang had swooped in to save Katara, because she's separated from him now. And yet, Zuko and Iroh and June are still tracking her. And then after that, they had reconciled, and Sokka and Katara had decided to go with Aang then. But the fact that it happened before that makes it all the stronger. All the action happens at the Abbey again, and we get some really great action set pieces here. June and Nyla fight against Appa. This is a rare Appa fight. We actually get to see him airbend, and he's a pretty strong airbender in his own right, as well as being powerful enough to shake off the paralyzing toxin, I guess, from Nyla's tongue, at least for a while. And while he's holding off the two of them, Aang fights Zuko. And whereas Aang, like, he's fought Zuko before, but Aang still has trouble really being direct and damaging with his airbending. Here we see him really cut loose. Like, he's still doing some of the old evasive moves that we had seen him do in the past. He seems to have trouble a little bit switching from them into something more offensive still, which is, it's so cool that that's a thing you can pick up on from his movements here, right? But he does fight very directly with Zuko here, and more or less fights him to a standstill until he's able to maneuver Zuko into position to use his water bending to overwhelm him, which ends up being the thing that tips the scales, and allows him to get Katara's necklace back, which by the end of the episode earns him a kiss on the cheek. Go Aang. But again, in keeping with the fact that this is the episode where Sokka proves himself, it's Sokka's rite of passage episode, where he proves how essential he is to this team. He's the one who saves the day. Because remember those big clay pots of perfumes that I wanted to shatter? Well, he uses those. He has Katara waterbend the perfume around Nyla, since Nyla sees with her nose. His nose, its nose. What is Nyla's gender? I don't know. It doesn't matter. He essentially blinds the creature. Essentially, they blind the creature and send it into a confused frenzy. It paralyzes all the bad guys. And they even have a little bit of reconciliation at the end where Sokka just flat out calls Aang a member of his family. And it's really sweet. It's a good episode. It's an excellent episode, in fact. It's one of my favorite of Season 1. Bato's a really fun character. And he's not exactly Sokka and Katara's dad, but you get the sense he's probably fairly similar, right? Except it's mentioned at one point that he and Sokka, the dad and Sokka, have a similar wit. So you can imagine it's Bato, but goofier like Sokka can be, right? So we get kind of a preview of the kind of person that their dad is before we meet him. I mean, we meet him a little bit in the flashback, but you know what I mean. We really get the sense that this war is happening, that there's actual war stuff happening that these kids just don't really interact with. It expands the world in that way. And it's just a fun, entertaining episode in general. Like Iroh, for example. It's not like he's devoid of personality literally ever or anything, but he feels like he has so much personality in this episode. Just like making eyes at June because, I mean, she's very attractive, right? And like a little scene where he likes the smell of one of the perfumes, so he like pickpockets a little bottle and then looks around all sly. Like just stuff like that. There's just these fun, personality-rich scenes injected all throughout this episode. Not to mention that Sokka, a character who, like, he hasn't really had his own thing up to this point. He's been the straight man to the other characters, and their sometimes naive and trusting natures, but he hasn't really had his own niche. Now he has his niche as the tactical guy. And I think that's pretty cool, because those are the kinds of characters I tend to like to follow the most out of ensemble casts. And that's probably one of the reasons that, like, even if there are other characters that I like overall better, I tend to like Sokka plots a lot when they come up. And it's got me really hyped for some future Sokka plots. Like Sokka's Master, for example. I can't wait to get to that one, where we get a chance to see how his tactical side mixes with his unorthodox way of thinking. We'll get to that when we get to it. This was just, it's really fantastic. I like it a lot. I do think it's worth noting, though, that this episode does touch on the idea of, like, parents and parentification again a little bit. Like, I've talked about how, at this point, Katara and Sokka are kind of like surrogate parental figures to Aang, almost, even though he's more like a little brother to them at this point. And that's not even to mention the fact that the characters in this, like, so many of them are devoid of parental figures of any kind, even surrogate ones. Like, Iroh is the closest thing to a recurring parental figure in this show at this point. And here we finally get a glimpse of Sokka and Katara's dad, and it's to abandon them to go to war, which, I mean, that's the thing he needed to do, right? I'm not dissing the guy for it. And putting Sokka in charge of taking care of his little sister, parentifying him, which is a thing that I hate that. I hate when parents do that to their kids. And yet in this situation, it was honestly his best option. It was either leave Sokka behind and give him a reason to want to stay behind, or take him with them, where he just would have gotten in the way or gotten himself killed, or both, or just left him to stew with no purpose. Out of those three options, one of them is objectively the best and safest for him. And it's that one that does that thing to him that I hate when parents do it to their kids. It's another example of how this war caused by the Fire Nation, started by the Fire Nation, has put all these people in these horrible positions that go above and beyond just having to fight for their lives. This affects multiple generations. And no matter how hard the older generation try to prevent that from happening, they can't diminish that impact completely. It's a great example of the kinds of nuanced war storytelling that this show manages to pull off as masterfully as something like let's use Game of Thrones as an example, the early seasons anyway, since it's another fantasy. But like, that show had a lot of political stuff in it. And I think this show does the political and war-related stuff even better sometimes, and at worst, just as well. and it's more subtle about it. And the ending's better. So let's wrap up before I dwell on that for too long. Guys, if you have seen Bato of the Water Tribe, what do you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.